Boom. Antonio speaks, nigga. Stephon, the extreme house of Negro.
Depictions were often deeply unsettling and hard for me to watch. Most of the time, they left me feeling sad, angry, and this strange sense of familiarity that I truly cannot explain. But back in 2012, a slave movie was released that I could actually digest, Django Unchained. This was a gripping West adventure set in pre-Civil War American South. The film follows Django, a man who was given an unexpected chance at freedom and embarks on a journey that changes his life forever. Along the way, he teams up with a charismatic bounty hunter, develops new skills, and faces increasingly dangerous challenges in his quest to rescue his wife. What I loved the most about this film, though, was how it was able to still portray the brutality of chattel slavery while also balancing it with humor, action, drama, and entertainment. It never shied away from how cruel and barbaric this era was, but it also knew how to lighten the mood. 11-year-old me loved it, and fast forward to 2026, I think I love it even more. In today's video, instead of discussing the entire film, I want to do a breakdown on a specific character, someone I consider to be one of the most evil movie villains of all time, Steven. But throughout this video, I call him Stephon because it's spelled Stephon, but that don't matter, y'all. Tomato, tomato, same thing. Portrayed masterfully by Samuel L. Jackson, Stephon is a character who never fails to get under my skin. Samuel L. absolutely killed this role, and every time I watch it, it pissed me off even more. I think the reason this character gets under my skin so much is because we walk amongst these type of individuals in 2026. The trash pandas, the I'm black and I didn't get offended type of archetype. The black individuals who are so desperate for white validation that they'll do anything to get it, including hating themselves and doing harm to people who look like them. In 2026, they may not be as extreme as Stephon, but they up there with him. Now, we don't meet Stephon until about an hour and a half into the film, so it's only right I give you a quick rundown of the story leading up to our introduction to Stephon. The movie begins in 1858 with Django, an enslaved man being marched across Texas with a group of other enslaved people. The journey is interrupted by Dr. King Schultz, a former dentist turned bounty hunter. Schultz is searching for the Brittle brothers and discovers that Django is the only person who can identify them. He purchases Django's freedom in a unconventional manner and takes him along to help track them down. After locating the Brittle brothers, Schultz kills them and collects the bounty. True to his word, he grants Django his freedom. Impressed by Django's intelligence, courage, and composure under pressure, Schultz offers him a partnership, help hunt bounties through the winter, and in return, Schultz will help Django find and rescue his wife, Broomhilda von Schaft. Eventually, they learn Broomhilda has been sent to Calvin J. Candy, the wealthy owner of a massive Mississippi plantation known as Candyland. Candy is infamous for his fascination with Mandingo fighting, violent forced fights between enslaved men, staged for entertainment and gambling. Knowing that simply asking to buy Broomhilda isn't going to work, Schultz comes up with a plan. He and Django will pose as wealthy buyers interested in purchasing one of Candy's prized Mandingo fighters for an outrageous sum of money. While Candy is focused on closing that lucrative deal, they tend to quietly purchase Broomhilda as a secondary transaction and leave before he realizes their true intentions. It is here at Candyland that we are finally introduced to Stephon. He's calmly sitting in the parlor while managing Candyland's finances. He is filling out and signing checks on behalf of Calvin Candy, a very unusual sight for an enslaved man at that time period. Throughout the South, strict anti-literacy laws were enacted between 1740 and 1834 to prevent enslaved people from learning to read and write. Slave owners feared that education would encourage resistance. It'll undermine the institution of slavery and potentially inspire a rebellion. Despite severe punishment, historians estimate that only 5 to 10% of enslaved people knew how to read and write. Stephon's literacy and financial responsibilities are likely a result of his position as a house slave. Historically, enslaved people in America were often divided by their labor roles, with the most common distinction being between field slaves and house slaves. Field slaves performed agricultural labor such as planting, harvesting, and tending to crops. They endured the hardest working conditions, had limited contact with the slaveholders, and typically lived in
Now I'm black as fuck. You know I'd be like that in them fields. Fuck, I would hate it. Nigga, you gotta kill me in that bitch. Fuck that.
separate quarters with fewer privileges. House slaves, by contrast, work within the slaveholder's household as cooks, maids, valets, butlers, nannies, or personal attendants. While they remain enslaved and vulnerable to abuse, they often receive better clothing, food, and living conditions. Their close proximity to slaveholders also gave some access to education, specialized skills, and positions of trust. They often became emotionally attached to the master and his interests.
And the house Negro always looked out for his master. When the field Negroes got too much out of line, he held them back in check. He put them back on the plantation. The house Negro could afford to do that because he lived better than the field Negro. He ate better, he dressed better, and he lived in a better house. He lived right up next to his master in the attic or the basement. He ate the same food his master ate and wore his same clothes. And he could talk just like his master. Good diction. And he loved his master more than his master loved himself. That's why he didn't want his master hurt. If the master got sick, he'd say, "What's the matter, boss? We sick?" When the master's house caught a fire, he'd try and put the fire out. He didn't want his master's house burned. He never wanted his master's property threatened. And he was more defensive of it than the master was. That was the house Negro.
Stephon likely acquired his literacy, bookkeeping abilities, and understanding of business through this role. He occupies a far more influential position than a typical house slave. This could also be due to the fact that Stephon is 76 years old. He's been around a long time. He showed his worth. He had to step on a lot of Negroes' backs to get to the position that he's at. And this is what we see in 2026. This individual success is so detrimental because you have to step on a few hands to get to the top. And most of those hands are going to be people that look like you. As Stephon handles the plantation's finances, some checks bear a stamped version of Calvin Candy's signature, most likely created by Calvin Candy with his own hand, while others are signed by Stephon himself, carefully reproducing his master's signature. Now right here I have a picture of both checks on the screen. The handwritten version produced by Stephon appears more fluid, balanced, and naturally spaced, while the stamped version is comparatively rigid and less refined. This visual detail reinforces a larger theme surrounding Stephon's character. Stephon appears to be the true functioning mechanism behind this whole operation. As Django, Schultz, and Calvin arrive at the main house of Candyland, Stephon is waiting outside. He has gray hair, a wrinkled face. He appears weak and harmless. However, as this film progresses, it'll become clear that this whole perception was a ploy. What immediately stands out is his reaction to seeing Django, a black man confidently riding a horse and carrying himself with a level of status and authority that enslaved people were not supposed to have at that time. Stephon shook, and anger is written all over his face. In fact, he seems to be more agitated than any other white overseers. This reaction shows perfectly how internalized racism can bleed out. Stephon has spent years adapting to and benefiting from the plantation's hierarchy, so seeing Django challenge that system threatens his worldview. At the same time, we can also see this reaction as jealousy from Stephon. Here's another black man receiving respect, freedom of movement, and privileges that Stephon never had. And unlike him, Django didn't have to bootlick to get these privileges. Stephon then greets Calvin, and this interaction is very interesting. Stephon first questions him, asking who is Django, and then the two start joking on each other. Stephon stating, "I miss you like I miss a rock stuck in my shoe." Off the bat, we can see the type of relationship they have. This doesn't come off as a slave and owner, more like two friends. Stephon once again asks, "Who is Django?" Django then responds. Stephon immediately becomes agitated and then has to be calmed down by Calvin. Calvin explains that Django is a free man and that he and Dr. Schultz are simply customers that are here to purchase a slave. As guests, they should be treated with hospitality. Stephon replies that he understands having to treat Dr. Schultz with respect, but why Django? He's just a nigga. This right here is reflective of something that we still see in 2026. Some black people will blindly accept authority from non-black people, yet question or challenge when that same authority comes from a person that looks like them. Through generations of conditioning and influence of the dominant social structures, many have internalized these feelings of inferiority. As a result, some struggle to see people who look like themselves equally worthy of respect, competence, or leadership. Even the hostility that can exist in black men is telling.
You know, I see because I'm banging on everything. Only people I'm not banging on is white boys and Mexicans. You feel me? They not my.
We appreciate it.
You know. Thank you very much. It's regular that a nigga go, I'ma bang on everything black that I see. You feel me? Period. You got the potential to harm me and my homies from the gate. I'm on you. You feel me? Period. So
because of this stigma, for the past couple of years, I tried to do something to combat this in my real life. Whenever I'm out in public, say the grocery store, running some errands, on vacation, etc., whenever I come across another black man, I'm giving him the head nod. And to take it further, if I have time, I'll small talk with him, compliment his shoes, tell bro his hair look fire, all types of small things, something just to uplift my brothers when the whole world already hate us. In 2026, I believe that solidarity is the #1 key for the black community. Anti-blackness comes from all different angles, and one of the strongest ways to resist this is to love one another. I know it sounds cliche, but it's true. We got to start being more patient with each other, extend more grace, seek understanding, and give one another the benefit of the doubt. And if we want to excel as the powerful people that we are, we got to spread more love amongst each other. At the bargaining, Calvin orders Stephon to prepare the guest rooms for Dr. Schultz and Django. Before heading inside, Dr. Schultz asks Calvin if once he's settled in, can Hildy be sent to his room. Calvin agrees and tells Stephon to go fetch her, clean her up, and send her over. There's just one problem. The night before, Hildy attempted to escape. As punishment, she was thrown into the hot box, a cruel, brutal torture device where enslaved people were stripped of their clothing and locked inside a cramped, coffin-sized metal enclosure, partially buried in the ground beneath the scorching southern sun. This wasn't just some fictional torture device created for this film. It was a real thing. The sweat box, sometimes called the slave box. Its origins can be traced back to the American Revolutionary War, where similar methods were used against Native Americans. However, it became especially associated with Southern slavery during the 1800s, when enslavers used it to punish enslaved people for perceived acts of disobedience or resistance. Stephon suggested that she be remained in a hot box for 10 days, but because of Dr. Short's request, Calvin releases her after only one night. He argues that she should be forced to serve her full punishment, revealing just how deeply invested he is in maintaining the hierarchy. In moments like this, Stephon appears more cruel than Calvin. While Calvin's racism is overt and expected, Stephon actively enforces the system against other black people, often with enthusiasm that surpasses his master. After not wanting to, he orders the overseers to let Hildy free from the box, and once free, tells the other house slaves to get her cleaned up for Dr. Shorts. After Hildy is brought to Dr. Shorts' room and reunites with Django, everyone begins preparing for dinner. As the food is being made, Stephon walks through the kitchen, even taking time to flirt with one of the enslaved women. He eventually makes his way to the dining room, where Calvin, Dr. Shorts, and others are discussing which slave the doctor intends to purchase. Throughout this conversation, Stephon is constantly going out of his way to make jokes at the expense of black people. At one point, one of the Mandingo fighters, nicknamed Black Hercules, is mentioned, and Stephon quickly adds, "It's more like niggalese." The conversation eventually shifts to Hildy though. During the discussion, Calvin's sister jokingly suggests that Hildy has a romantic interest in Django. Hildy looks up in shock, while Django quickly turns his head, trying to conceal any emotion that he may have expressed on his face. Dr. Shorts jumps in with a joke of his own to keep the atmosphere light. While everyone else moves on from the moment, Stephon doesn't. He notices the subtle glances, the awkward body language, and the familiarity between Django and Hildy. He seems to be the only one at the table that recognizes something is off. Suspicious, he follows Hildy into the kitchen and begins questioning her. He pressures her, insisting that she must know Django. Hildy denies it, but Stephon remains unconvinced and warns her she better not be lying. When Stephon returns back to the dining room, we see how good he is at extracting information. The doctor and Calvin eventually reach an agreement for the purchase of Eskimo Joe for $12,000. Check this out. $12,000 back in 1858 when this movie took place would equate to $400,000 in 2026. God damn. With the business settled, the conversation shifts into casual small talk. Calvin asks Hildy, how does it feel to serve in a big house? Before she can answer, Stephon pressures her to respond. After she does, Calvin and Stephon begin teasing her. They say things implying she would enjoy herself more entertaining the male slaves than serving dinner guests. Stephon then escalates things further. He insists that Dr. Shorts see Hildy scarred and heavily whipped back. Throughout all of this, Django is visibly struggling to contain his emotions, and that's exactly what Stephon wants. Everything he does during this scene is designed to test his growing suspicion. By placing Hildy in this humiliating situation and watching Django's response, Stephon had all the evidence he needed. By the end of the dinner, he has put two and two together. While everyone else remained distracted by business and conversation, Stephon has uncovered the truth. Django and Hildy know each other, and whatever brought Django to Candyland is much bigger than the purchase of a Mandingo fighter. With all this information, Stephon convinces Calvin to meet him in the library. When Calvin enters the library, Stephon is sitting comfortably, one leg crossed over the other, casually sipping wine. His presence here is completely different from what we see when they're in public. He then gives Calvin the full breakdown of the situation, explaining that Django and the doctor never came for the Mandingo fighter, but instead for Broomhilda. During this conversation, Stephon talks to him almost as if he is his child. Earlier in the film, we learned that Stephon was also serving under Calvin's father. So it's possible that Stephon has filled this, father-like role. Everything suddenly begins to click for Calvin. The observations Stephon has gathered fit together perfectly. And in this moment, we see how agitated and mad he is at himself that he fell for this trick. Armed with this new understanding, he confronts Django and Dr. Shorts. After a very tense negotiation, and honestly one of my favorite scenes in this entire movie, they ultimately agree that Calvin will only sell Broomhilda to Dr. Shorts for 12 racks. Later, Calvin is seen in his office finalizing the paperwork. During this sequence, Dr. Shorts appears visibly uncomfortable.
Bro, are you fucking kidding me? Oh my god, bro, this shit pissing me off. Are you dead? Oh my god, are you dead? My fault, y'all. Fucking.
Throughout his time at Candyland, he has witnessed some brutal things. What really traumatized the doctor the most was moments earlier to pulling up into the main house plantation, where we saw an escaped slave get eaten alive by dogs because he tried to escape. As Schultz waits for the deal to be completed, all of these memories just replay in his head. Unable to contain his disgust any longer, Schultz abruptly orders the musician to stop playing and storms into Calvin's office. Stephon immediately tries to stop him, but Calvin reassures him that everything is under control. Calvin then approaches Schultz with the completed paperwork and a slice of a white cake. Schultz declines, and after a brief conversation, Calvin signs Broomhilda's freedom papers. Schultz says his goodbyes and prepares to leave, but Calvin has one final request. He wants a handshake. Now, this moment right here was really a sense of dominance that Calvin wanted to assert. At first, Schultz refuses and insists that this is a bad idea. Calvin continues to pressure him, demanding the gesture is a sign of respect and submission. And also, if they don't shake on it, the deal doesn't get finalized. Eventually, Schultz agrees, but in that moment, Calvin knew he fucked up. Unable to stomach Calvin's request, Schultz shoots him point blank and he dies. Stephon's reaction is priceless, crying and screaming like a child who just lost a parent. This scene literally reminds me of how so many of these black MAGA men reacted to the death of Charlie Kirk. On September 10th, 2025, Charlie Kirk was shot and killed. My view on the situation is this: the chickens came home to roost that day, point blank, period. I don't feel sorry for him. The whole sequence leading up to him being shot was just so poetic though. In Kirk's final remarks, he was asked a question about mass shooting. Instead of taking accountability and address the problem at hand, he moves the goalpost and tries to blame it on gang violence. Moments later, he got kirked. And guess who it was by? A young white man with conservative ties. Now, many people around the world had their reaction to his death, but the one that stands out the most to me is from the huge conservative black YouTuber by the name of Officer Tatum. He was seen crying in front of his audience of thousands of people. He was seen crying in front of his...
That's a different thing. I mean, I would try not to cry in front of my wife if my kid died.
To be like the support.
No, yeah, I'm her foundation. I'm her strong point. I'll cry on my own, but if everything is going south, I want my wife to know I'm strong in that situation, and I can be. I don't have to cry. I can do that on another time.
So you will cry over a random racist podcaster that you may have had a few conversations with, but not over your own family? You will cry in front of thousands of viewers, but not your wife? After an intense shootout, Django is captured, and Dr. Schultz, along with many other Candyland overseers, are also killed in the process. The next time we see Django,
he's Dr. Schultz, man, real ass nigga,
hanging upside down, about to be castrated. If you don't know what castration is, it is when they snip down there. Yeah. Just as this act was about to be carried out, Stephon intervened and announces that Calvin's sister has changed her mind and something else is planned for him. Stephon is actually the driving force behind this decision. In his eyes, castration isn't enough. More than likely, Django will bleed out and die shortly afterwards. Basically, it's an easy way out for him. Most of the people at Candyland simply want Django dead, whether that be by whipping, being torn apart by dogs, or some other brutal but immediate form of death. Stephon, however, he thinks that Django deserves worse. Eventually, Laura agrees to sell Django to the LaQuint Dickey mining company, where he will be worked to death under horrific conditions. It's essentially a death sentence, just a slower and more profitable one. And guess what? Stephon absolutely loves this idea. Now I want to talk about that mining company because it reminds me of the sugar plantations that we seen down south, but these were mainly in the Caribbean. A lot of people don't know this, but the slaves in the Caribbean, most of them died. The working conditions were so bad, and one of the most cruel forms of punishment, right, was being boiled alive in a big vault of sugar. I just think it's such an injustice for us to forget about this type of stuff. Like, they just want us to, oh, it happened, right? But it's like, no, bro, do y'all truly understand how evil these people were? To put a human being in a boiling vault of sugar and watch them and do it over and over and over. We aren't dealing with human beings, man. It's crazy. Back to Stephon, though. This situation just shows how cruel and calculating he really is. It also highlights how much influence and pull he has over people at Candyland and also the plantation in general. Even after Calvin's death, he's still making decisions. While in the middle of being transported, Django manages to outsmart the slave traders. He convinces him that he's a bounty hunter and can help them collect valuable rewards. Once they lower their guard, Django sees the opportunity, kills them, and escapes. At this point, Django could have simply just ran off, but no, he needed to finish what he started. So he goes back to Candyland, and this is where we see him eliminate everyone that he missed the first time. After killing Laura, only one target remains, Stephon. What makes this scene so memorable is the fact that Stephon shows the real him. He drops the helpless, frail old man act, and after releasing his cane, he can walk perfectly fine. It was all a ploy. Django then finishes him off. He shoots him in both of his knees, leaving him withering on the floor. While this is happening, Stephon is still talking his shit, which I do admire. Don't cop please now that you're about to die. Stand up what you always stood on. As he continues to talk his shit, Django sets the place on fire. Stephon is dead. Calvin is dead. He got his wife. They up out of there. But yeah, y'all, man, Stephon is one of my favorite movie villains, right? Not my favorite. He irks my soul, but he's written so good. The reason he bothers me so much, like I stated in the intro, is because he reminds me of so many people we see in 2026. Whether that be black men or black women, there are so many kiss-ups and bootlickers who actively talk down on their own people for a seat at the table. They are hurting the collective of black people just for that individual success. And there are so many. The reason he bothers me so, they are hurting the collective of so many people we see in 2026. Whether that be black men or black women, there are so many kiss-ups and bootlickers who
Damn, she fine. She is fine though. If someone's black dick, she get on. Oh God.
Talk down on their own people for a seat at the table. They are hurting the collective of black people just for that individual success. And there are so many examples that I can bring up, but the main one I want to highlight really quick, Clarence Thomas. It's just so funny because his rise, man, he started off following Malcolm X. He was a black nationalist at one point, but everything seemed to change once he went to I believe, affirmative action meeting where he met his white wife. This is a man who benefited from affirmative action. He benefited from all of these things he is now trying to dismantle. He currently has a spot in the Supreme Court, and a few months ago voted on dismantling the Voting Rights Act that benefited black people. The only black man in that Supreme Court seat actively voted against black Americans. Truly, he climbed to the top, kicked the ladder down. If he see any more hands up, he step on them. And that is exactly what Stephon represents in this movie, and we see it in 2026. I want to give a huge shout out to this creator right here, man. He did a full breakdown on Clarence Thomas. I highly recommend you guys go check this video out when you're done with this one. He goes very